Everybody. Welcome to another live stream. I haven't done one of these for so long, and actually, as much as I used to, they used to terrify me. I absolutely love them, and I don't do enough of them. And I like them best when I'm not just sitting here talking to you guys through the camera. I like it best when I've got a guest, and I am absolutely thrilled to have tonight's guest. We've done a live stream before, but in a little group, but we're here, just the two of us, to have a girly chinwag. Hello, Kris Robinson. Hello.
Hello, Bev. Thank you so much for having me on your channel today. I've been really looking forward to this.
Me too. Me too. And before I get into introductions, I will just say that you've been quite pivotal in helping me reach my retirement decision. You might not know that. I've never told you that. But watching your stuff on YouTube and watching and learning about your journey has really helped me to just, I guess, join the dots in my own journey towards retirement. So, Kris, do me a favor, say hello, introduce yourself, and tell us a little bit about who you are. I'm going to leave it wide open. You can go as deep or as shallow as you want.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. So for any of you that are watching that have not seen me over on my channel, especially, I am 57 years old and I have been retired for 5 years. I retired in 2020, which was a very pivotal year for a lot of people, but my background is in my career was in human resources in Silicon Valley. And as you can imagine, that was quite stressful in the startup environment and the fast-paced world that is. And loved my career. I absolutely loved my jobs and everything that it taught me and all the experiences that it gave me. In 2019. Let's see, we were empty nesters at the time. Our two sons are both in their 30s now. So we were empty nesters. And in 2019, I got a cancer diagnosis. And it was stage 1, thank goodness, ovarian cancer. And I promptly went in and had massive surgery to get everything out, and then went into chemo and spent all of the fall and winter in chemotherapy. And just as I was entering out of chemotherapy, the pandemic hit. So my husband and I had been talking about retiring early, which at that time we thought would be our late 50s, because in large part, both of his parents died of different cancers in their mid 60s. And my family, excuse me, my family had a history of a number of people dying in their 50s and 60s. And so, so we had been thinking about it and sort of planning for it and imagining it and dreaming it. And then when I got my cancer diagnosis and then the pandemic hit and my company went through a really big layoff because we were largely dependent on in-person educational conferences all over the world. And so that came to a screeching halt. And they did a round of layoffs. And so I was given the choice to either lay myself off or lay off the other person in my department. And I thought, do you know how hard it's going to be to find a job at 52, completely bald head, no eyebrows, clearly had just gone through cancer, during a pandemic at an executive level? Like, I knew it was going to take me at least a year of looking. And so we kind of hunkered down and reran some of the numbers that we had looked at and decided we could go ahead and retire earlier even than we had planned, with some changes to our plan. So then we set off on our big adventure, and I'll kind of leave it at that. But my decision to retire came largely out of major life events and how it made me rethink everything. And so I started my channel, which I'm now sort of rebranding both with my name, but also as Life After Work. as a place to talk about the thought processes and the things that we think about before, during, and after the retirement process. Because I think I did okay, but had I had more input and more discussions with people about their experiences, it might have informed some of my choices differently. I don't know.
Mm.
But I think, like, what is this life if we can't share it with each other and learn from each other? So that's why I started my channel, and that's why it's about retirement in general.
What I love about your channel, thank you for that. We've got 4 people watching, so hello. If you're watching live, do drop a hello in the chat so we can see who's out there. And if you've got any thoughts or questions, do share them, because I always find the chat is just as interesting often as the conversation.
Yes.
I mean, I resonate with so much about what you said in terms of sort of people within the family who've passed away early. And I think we do get to an age, probably in midlife, where we just take stock and think, oh, I might not have as many ahead of me as I've had behind me. And what do I want to do with the years ahead of me? And what I love about your channel is you talk about the emotional side of retirement. There's lots and lots of people out there talking about retirement and doing some great work on YouTube, but they're talking about it from a very, I guess, financial and practical level,
Yes.
which you do talk about that as well. But I think for me, the financial side of things, I find it very, very hard to talk about that, because I didn't do any of the hard work. My husband did it all. He's put us in the position where we're able to where I'm able to retire, and I'm very grateful for that. So the financial side, we are in a good position. And I think
Mhm.
it would be very disingenuous of me to be giving advice on how to manage your finances to get you into a position to be able to retire when I haven't done that work.
Right.
I can talk to him and share. I do think it is something that you have to plan for from quite an early age. Whether you can play catch up, I don't know, but we certainly were in a good position. So I'd love you to share
Mhm.
some of the thoughts and the thought processes, I guess, that you've gone through during the transition, not necessarily on the ride up to making the
Mhm.
decision, but some of the, if it's anything like me, a bit of a roller coaster around identity and all sorts. I don't want to
Mm.
put in your mind what you're going to say, but if you can talk me through some of that kind of the emotions that have gone on since
Yep.
you retired. Does
Yep.
that make any sense as a question?
Absolutely. I'm right there with you, Bev. I get you. So to your point, you're right. Like, when I started looking into retirement and wanting to get advice, everything, that I Googled, or whether it was on YouTube or somewhere else, was all about money. 98% of it was all about the finances. And that's really important. Like, you can't retire unless you have a way to sustain yourself, right? But that felt to me, we're also very fortunate to be able to do this. But that felt to me like, okay, yeah. There's lots of information, there's lots of resources. Everybody's going to have to make their own decision, but there's so much more to it. And the first thing that I experienced had to do with, it was a little bit about identity, but it also was about independence and freedom. And the moment came when we had made the decision to retire, and we were winding up our life as we knew it, which is a whole other story. But basically, we were selling most of our stuff and leaving the home that we had been living in. And as a part of that, we sold my car first. And when I sat there and watched the person drive away with my car, I I cried, and then I thought, "Oh, that's gross. It's just a car. Why do I feel this way about it?" And as I thought about it, it was like, "No, this is about my independence. This is about me being able to say, I need to get out of here for a little bit, or I want to go do this, or whatever it was, and just jumping in the car and going." And it was also the place where, over the years, I made the transition from work to home and home to work, and went through a lot of emotions there, processing stress, unwinding, doing, and I felt like there was a part of my life that I spent on my commute, and to watch that just drive away and not have anything to replace it was really, discombobulating is the best word I can come up with to
Mm.
describe it. And that was my first realization, "Oh, this is not just a financial journey and making plans to go, live on the beach. This is an emotional journey, a mental health journey, a psychological journey, and I'm gonna need to start paying attention to some things." So that was the first kind of, real thing, and then I would say 6 months or so after I finally left my job, we landed in Mexico, and that was by choice because it was just much more, affordable to live there. That was one of the choices we had to make, and I began the unwinding process, and I thought, "Oh, I've been on vacations, proper vacations of 3 or 4 weeks at a time." I'm very proud of that, but, um, I thought, "Okay, it'll probably take a little bit longer than that, but, I'll give myself 6 weeks, maybe 2 months to de-stress and unwind and get ready for the rest of my life." I completely underestimated how long that process was gonna take, and, it went in stages, but I would say that it was easily a year or more, closer to 2 in some ways, that I really was able to detach myself from my previous identity and my previous energy level of, hustle culture and go, go,
Mm.
go, and to really fundamentally make a shift in how I went about life. And so, that was a thing too. It just took a lot longer than I thought, and I'm very lucky to be able to have. I think what helped was that I was in a different country with different people, and that it was a nice break for my brain to say this is different. And it's actually one of the things that I recommend to people is if you can, and I'm looking at you here, Bev, too. If you can, at some point early on in your retirement, do something that uproots you a little bit, even if it's just for a month or so at a time, but make big changes that signal to your brain, "So this is different. This is not, as normal." And because I think that ultimately really helped me out a lot,
Mm.
was making
It's
that shift.
interesting. I would say I'm still in the kind of the holiday
Yes.
phase of retirement, and so I I guess I made the final decision 'cause if anybody's been watching any of my videos, I've been talking about kind of semi-retiring and being semi-retired for quite some time. But just before Christmas, conversation with my husband, it was like, "Actually, do you know what? This is it." But it isn't really it because 'cause I'm still doing a little bit of work for some clients. So it's
Mm.
we'll talk about what retirement
Yes.
actually means in a
Yes.
moment. But
Yes.
I'm definitely in that sort of holiday
Mhm.
phase, if
As
that
you
if
should
that
be.
so I don't really know what it's gonna be like or how
Mhm.
I'm gonna feel when this time is up, and instead of it feeling like a nice long break, it starts to feel like an empty void. I don't
Yeah.
know if it ever will
Yep.
or if, if I'll naturally fill that with things. I'm still doing my YouTube stuff. I've got 2
Mhm.
channels, which is making it quite, you know, a bit busy with
Yes.
editing and filming. Um, and we've just bought our camper van and we're going and doing things. So I haven't really, I don't think, had time to sit down and think what comes after the holiday phase.
Mhm.
Did you experience that kind of "Ah, that's great. I don't have to get up now. I'm on holiday."
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Although I would say for me, again, kind of going back to conversations we've had in the past, everybody's experience is uniquely different. And where I think mine is different than yours is that I retired basically in March of 2020. So in the middle of the pandemic. So, spent another month and a half unwinding, the life that we were in, and then got in a car and drove from the San Francisco Bay Area up to where we are now, which is Washington State, to sort of ride out the pandemic with family members and who were gracious enough to open their homes to us. And so there really wasn't, I couldn't do anything. So it made it a little bit harder in that way. The good news is that I wasn't in my home that I had been in for all those years.
Mm.
It was that sort of visual mental break. I was in a new place, but I couldn't do anything. Couldn't go anywhere. Excuse me. There was a lot, a lot of sort of standing around waiting. And then finally in September, so we spent all summer here. In September, then we made the leap and went to Mexico. And that's when the real holiday started. Really. I think that was, there was a nice pause. And then, but I was also still physically recovering from cancer and from all the chemotherapy. So that was a process in and of itself. And I had to regain my strength. But then when we got to Mexico and we were on the beach every day, eating wonderful Mexican food and just experiencing that whole culture, that was the holiday. And it took, I think, so we were in our first place there for 3 months. And I think that whole 3 months felt like a vacation to me. It was, we had a pool. It was still COVID. And in Mexico, they didn't start getting vaccines until long after we did in the US. And so, so again, we weren't still really out and about a lot, although all of the restaurants were outside and open air anyway. That's just the way it is there. So we were able to do some things, but not a lot. It was still very sort of hunkered down.
Mm.
And I did, but that really was the vacation period for me, I think. And then we came back for the holidays here in the States for Christmas. And then when we went back again, that's when the real adjustment, I think, started. It was like, okay, that was the holiday. Now
Yeah.
we're sort of into making a day-to-day life for ourselves and all that meant. And to your point about still doing a little bit of work, I still took on, I was consulting with the company that I had just left, maybe 5 hours a week at most. So it wasn't a lot, but I was still engaged there a little bit. So that also was a nice transition.
I was going to
And
say,
that,
do you think it helped or made it harder? Because you talked a little while ago about it taking maybe 12 to 24 months to
yeah.
separate yourself from who you had been. Do you think that continued consulting helped or hindered?
I think it helped in the beginning. And then I got to a point where I realized, oh, that's not me anymore. That's not what I want to be doing. That's not how I want to spend my time, even if it was just a couple hours a week. I found myself kind of, about
Mm.
having to do that work and refocus and reshift my brain back to that professional mode. The good news is that the person that I was interfacing with at the company was a longtime colleague and dear friend of mine. So my interactions were not stressful, but I just realized I don't want to be doing that anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Can I
And
ask you, Chris, how did you and your husband find being together? I mean, huge amounts of change. Mark and I have just spent 2 weeks in a van together. We have a reasonably, I think I mentioned this in the video, we have a reasonably good sized
Mhm.
house. So
Right.
if we need a bit of space, we can easily get it. He's got a workshop out back where he goes and, that's his man shed.
Mhm.
And I've got my office. If I want a bit of space, I can come up here. 2 weeks in a van, we did not have any space. And it started to show genuinely. I mean, we've got a good relationship. We've been married 30 years, but the cracks started to show a little bit. Probably in the last few days when we realized that we were living 24/7 with one another. how did you what's your husband's name? Sorry, Kris.
His name is Dan.
Dan, you did mention
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Oh, I think he might be here.
He probably is. Hi, Dan.
So I'm going to pull this up because this is quite interesting. Your timing, Dan, is perfect. How do you think your husband's journey in the first few years differed from yours, and what advice would you give Bev about dealing with the difference? Brilliant question. Can we come to that one? I would just, if we can sort of pedal back, how did you both get on? It'd be interesting to hear Dan's response to this as well, actually. How did you find that?
So again, kind of a unique experience in that we started that journey even before I retired, because going through cancer and chemo, we were together 24/7. Anyway, he was my caretaker and did a brilliant job of it. And so we sort of had a little intro to it then, with a very different focus. But I think in general, so it is something we've definitely talked about. I am one who needs my time more so than he does, but he also very much enjoys time to himself. And at no point in our journey over the 5 years have we really had our own space and our own, excuse me. Um, we have been together 95% of that last 5 years, 24/7. We've each taken little trips here and there, which helps. But really, it's about like marriages, it's about grace and forgiveness and tolerance and all of that. And that goes both ways. I don't think I'm just speaking for myself, but we've had to be a little bit purposeful about being able to say, you know what, I'm going out for a while. No explanation needed, no justification needed, just I'm bugging out. And we have both taken a couple of trips to stay with friends here and there to give each other a break. But it's challenging because, we went from raising kids to, both having full-time careers and all of that. When you come home at the end of the day, you have a lot of stuff to talk about. Hey, honey, how was your day? Well, let me tell you about this. And now we experience the same day, each of us largely together. And so what do you talk about? So there is definitely, that is definitely something I think people should be aware of, especially not just, but especially if you both retire at the same time. If one person's still working, you still have a little bit of time in separation and things to talk about and stuff like that. But it's definitely a challenge. I wouldn't say it's been really difficult for us because I think we've been married. It'll be 35 years this year. And, and we've been really good at talking through stuff like that. So I think that's really, really important though, is recognize that. That's a great point, Bev. That is an issue that I think can surprise people.
Yeah. So Mark is still working.
Right.
He works for himself, so he doesn't work many hours a day, but he picks and chooses the hours he wants to work. And I think that's worked really well for us. But one of the things that I would say we have had to talk about quite candidly is I have a little pension, but my contribution to the household is minute compared to his now. And going back to your whole, feeling that independence, it feels I've had to kind of work through my own challenges around feeling like I'm suddenly taking and not giving. So we've done things like I've cancelled my cleaner because I feel like it's very hard to justify bringing in a cleaner when I'm not working anymore. And actually, I'm enjoying doing that. Never thought I'd say that, but I am. And I think it's a lot about not losing sight of who I am as an independent person.
Yes.
And still feeling like I'm contributing, because I think that for me has been the biggest challenge. Do you want to see if you can address Dan's question, because it's such a good question. Oh, by the way, hi Tracy, we've got Mini Scenes GB in there.
How do you think your husband's journey the first few years differed from yours? How is it different? Well, I think So I had a very different work life than he had. He was a real estate agent. So he was self-employed. He was every day was different for him. He'd be at home, he'd be in the office, he'd be out showing houses, so his was not a routine, whereas my job was very much a routine. I showed up. I worked from home sometimes, but I showed up at the office. I went through my day. I had the commute on both sides. So um I was used to routine, and he was a lot used to not having a routine.
Mm.
So I think that was an adjustment for me a little bit. I embraced that a lot, but I think that left me feeling a little bit more untethered maybe than he did. Um, he had been looking forward to retirement a lot longer than I had. And he could see it. He
Mm.
was the one who really drove all of that process. So he was already sort of living a little bit in the future there, whereas I had a lot of stuff to let go of.
Yeah.
And so our journeys along that route, I think, were very different. Um, I that's the main difference, I think, that I can think of. I'm seeing he's coming here. I think understanding that each is on their own journey, yes. Um, yes. He and I had conversations very early on in our marriage about how, um, you know, we were not to become one. That was never really how we approached it. It was really that we were both our own people on our own journeys, and you work hard and also hope really hard that over time those journeys, kind of, they're going to do like this rather than like this, right?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. You've obviously talked through this a lot with Dan, because his
Yep.
next comment was sometimes lines are parallel, sometimes they diverge. So,
And there you have
absolutely
it.
on the same page here. I think, I know some of my friends who I, I'm guessing might find this a challenge because
Mhm.
their partner, their husband, I get the impression, I'm not going to say names, and I am speculating, but knowing their relationship, my fear would be that if they retired together, the husband is going to feel like they need to be together 24/7 and hasn't got that independence. Whereas I don't know, maybe I'm making a generalization here, but I do think women generally tend to be a bit more independent. We tend to have more friendships. We
Mhm.
we tend to, be a little bit more open to, not being together with our partner all of the time. I think it's a bit
Right,
easier. I think
right,
for men it's either you're with your partner or you're at work. And when work's
right.
gone, what's left? Well, you're with your partner. It sounds like Dan's got this, perfectly sorted, but I can see it being a challenge for some. Um,
Yep.
as you know, I did a video quite recently. Retired at 59. I quit my business, closed my business, and retired at 59. And I talked in that about taking early retirement, and I got, as you do, a rather odd comment that seemed a bit overly aggressive, but there you go. In big shouty capital letters, 59 is not early retirement. Now, I know you were much younger. You were 51, 52,
52, yeah.
52. Um, and but it did get me thinking, is it not early? And I had a look, and in the UK, according to the Office for National Statistics, the average age for a woman to retire is 64. It's slightly over for men, slightly older
Mhm,
for men. It did go down slightly just after COVID, but it seems to be on the rise. It's
mhm.
going up. My state pension doesn't kick in until I'm 67.
Right.
So, to all intents and purposes, I think 59 is early.
Mhm.
I think we were having a chat offline beforehand. I think it's 62 in the US. I'd
Yeah.
just love to get your thoughts on, you know, first of all, how do we define being retired? And I'm going to throw in another little bit here. So
Yep.
hang on to the question, because I might forget and have to come back to it. I follow a lovely couple, a UK couple on YouTube called Early Retirement Wanderlust. They're both teachers or ex-teachers. They retired at 51, similar age to you,
Mhm.
and they class themselves as early retired. But he does some freelance writing for magazines. They're growing their YouTube channel. They have an income from their YouTube channel. So to all intents and purposes, they're not retired. They're still
Mhm,
working. So,
mhm,
and I'm still doing a little bit of work,
mhm.
for clients. But I class myself now as retired. How do we define it? Or rather, how do you define being retired? Because it seems a bit vague.
It is, and I think and it has connotations as well, and I did a video on that about how, retirement isn't for everybody, in part because of how we think of the word itself. And so I would say, to me, retirement, for me, it meant, like my channel says, life after work. And actually even more specific, life after career. So people will, get various jobs or do some consulting or have a YouTube channel or whatever it is, and but it's not wasn't their core. They're not still doing the thing that they did for most of their adult lives, full time, all, every day, all day. Um, it's there. I think people know when they've sort of made that break versus when they're still in it, and they're semi-retired, right? Maybe people are doing part-time work at that same career. But I think psychologically, making a break from the career, and then what is retirement, and then whatever you do after that, whether even if it's working, it's if it's by choice. There's a channel that talks about, work optional as the phrase to use. Once you become work optional, there's a fundamentally different mentality about how you approach things when you are doing it purely by choice versus I need to do this to sustain myself and plan for my future.
I think you've hit the nail on the
Okay.
head. I think you've hit the nail on the head. For me, it's about choice
Mhm.
because I have retired at 59, but you could argue if it was career, well, actually, my career, I made the decision to, end my career at 52 and
Right.
then start a business of my own. So did I
Right.
retire then? And then that was choice? Well, no, because while I was running my business, yes, it's nuanced, isn't it? The business
Yes.
was a choice, but serving my clients wasn't a choice.
Right.
I'd made a commitment to them, so I didn't have the choice. So now if I choose to grow my YouTube channel and do some work around that, it's choice. I could take it, I could leave it. It doesn't really
Yep.
matter. It is that mindset shift around actually I can do this. So
Mhm.
what are your thoughts on when is early retirement?
Again, like the devil's in the details, right? Earlier than what?
Exactly. It's relative,
Right?
isn't it? Yeah.
Is it earlier than you expected? Is it earlier than you are able to collect your pension or your Social Security or dip into your retirement account savings? What is that? And I think everybody's got to define that for themselves. You know, um, it sounds like your viewer felt like this is not early. She's like they felt f- it- maybe they were trying to defend themselves a little bit,
Mm.
from people who would say, "Oh, that's too early to retire. You shouldn't do that." eh, you know, it's such a personal definition, and you could hook it on what's the average age of retirement. You could put it in the context of, your family and people that and when they retired, and there's just so many different ways to define that I don't think we should hold each other to one specific
No.
definition of what early means. I think it's just earlier than what,
Yeah.
earlier for me, even though we were planning on retiring earlier than the average person in the US, when we actually did retire, we were even earlier than that. So, I don't know. I don't
Mm.
what do you
I
think?
think for me, I look around my, my friends and family and the ages that they've retired, and I'm earlier than them.
Mhm.
So, relative to them, I'm retired early.
Right.
It's nuanced, isn't it? And I think one of the other things that we mentioned or we were talking about before we came on here live was there's no absolutes in life. You know, there isn't any absolutes, and what's right for one person is going to be not right for somebody else.
Yes.
And it is about finding what's right for you and what feels right. Tracy's asked a question. Let me just pull it up on screen. Have you both filled your time so much you don't know that how you had time? Let me just see if I can read this. How did you have time for a job? If so, how long did it take to get to that stage? I'm not there yet, Tracy. I'm not there yet. I'm not filling my time because I've spent most of January on a holiday, and I'm now a little bit tied in February because we have caring responsibilities for an elderly relative, which I think is maybe a whole conversation that we could have on another live stream, because I think it is something that, you know, I'll be 100% honest and open here, and I'm gonna feel so much guilt and shame about this, but there's a little tad of resentment that I'm now retired, and that's being a little bit scuppered because of a caring responsibility, and that I cannot tell you how bad that makes me feel, but, you know, I'm human. So,
Yes, you are.
what about you, Kris? What about your response
So
to Tracy's question?
yeah, so I'll piggyback on what you just said in a different way, and again, I'm gonna feel awful and guilty and like a horrible human being, but I'm gonna let myself do that and give myself grace. But part of the way that we have filled our time, so we have since moved back from Mexico. We spent about 2.5, maybe 3 years there, and both of our sons, who live local here to where we are now, both had babies within a year of each other. And so we have been doing a lot of grandchild caregiving. And now it's down to about once a week, sometimes twice. But it is these little families need us right now. These are hard times for young folks, and it's very expensive, and they needed us. That's why we came back from Mexico. Both they needed us, and we had these little babies. We wanted to be a part of our lives, and it tugged on our heartstrings. But what would we be doing if we didn't have that? We'd probably be doing something very, very different. And that's, to your point, where I'm sure there are days where I feel some resentment, but it's not resentment at any person. It's just sort of, I wish I could go do this, right? This other thing. So there's that, but I think, how do I fill my time? I've never had a problem filling my time. I think my husband will laugh, but I'm absolutely over curious, I think, about a lot of things. And my brain, I don't have ADHD, but man, I'll tell you, my brain feels like it sometimes because I am all over the place in terms of my interests and where my brain goes on a day-to-day basis in terms of what I'm doing. And I can get lost in a book or a string of YouTube videos or doing research or whatever it is. I've never had a problem with that. I can't remember the last time I actually felt bored. I think in part because of that curiosity. But I would say it ebbs and flows too. I think it's okay to have downtime. It's okay. There was one year we lived in Mexico. I read 60 books in 1 year, which is a lot for me. I'm an avid reader, but even that was a lot. Like, I don't even do that now, but there was less to do there in terms of spending your time. So I read more. I still read a lot. I do things like, so I'm just about to hit send on an application for a seat on the art council of the city that we live in, which is a small commitment, but I'm interested. I want to know what that's like. I want to be involved. And so, you do something like that. Starting this YouTube channel, huge. Like, it took me a long time to really decide, okay, I'm going to do this. But there's a lot, as you know, Bev, there's a lot that goes into it. There's a steep learning curve. And even just the mental time that it takes you to come up with ideas and, what's going to work, what's not going to work. What do I want out of this channel? What's my strategy? What's my style? Like, there's just so much to think about. And now you've got 2 channels.
So they're quite closely connected in terms of Yeah, they're different content, but there's a similar vein running through them.
Right.
I think one of the things I'm struggling with, and I don't know if you relate to this, and I don't know if Tracy and Dan might relate to this. I know we've got 8 people watching, and not many people in the comments. So if you're there, don't be shy. Say hello. Um, there's a Scandinavian term called Nixon. Have you come across Nixon? Nixon is the art of doing nothing without guilt.
Yes.
And I'm not very good at that. I don't get bored very easily. And I like to be doing things, but there are times when I just don't want to do anything productive. I might just want to say, I have a book. I bought it from a charity shop. Do you call them thrift shops? I'm not sure what you call charity
Yeah.
shop.
Something like that. Yeah.
Goodwill or something. I paid 75p for it secondhand. It's the first novel I've read for ages, for pleasure, just to sit down and read for pleasure. And I find when I do things without any purpose, there's a huge amount of guilt sits behind that. And I think it comes from an upbringing, very working class family. My mum and dad were working class, hardworking people. I've worked all my life. Mark's very much a workaholic. So when I'm not doing something that feels, I can't believe I'm going to do air quotes. When I'm doing something that is not productive, there's a real guilt behind it. There's a real sense of I shouldn't be doing this. And I think that's going to be the thing that I'm going to have to work hardest at, to be able to just sit down with a book in the middle of the day and go, I don't have to be doing anything else. I can just read. Does that resonate at all?
It does. And I'm trying to bring myself back to the earlier weeks, months, and years of my retirement and how I felt. I have to say, I think for me, the stop and don't do anything came very naturally as well. So the first thing I would say, like the word should, I mean, I know you've heard this, the word should has all kinds of weight to it. And I always say words matter. And I love to sort of shift how I think about things, not I should be doing something else. The question is, do I want to be doing something else? And that's the shift, right? Getting out of your expectations and into what it is that you want and how you want to create your life. Now, you might want to be doing more than that. You might want to be go, 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 which is great, but doing it because you think you should, like, that's where, like, dig into that and figure out where that comes from and try really hard. Maybe it's saying affirmations every day or journaling about it or
okay to be lazy.
Letting it go, right? You worked really hard to get where you are, and you deserve the time to sit and do nothing. And you don't know any excuses or reasons or whatever. If you have downtime, take your downtime. And I think, especially as we get older, our physical well-being is super important, and sleeping those 8 hours a day. And so we got very used to taking naps. We called them siestas, and obviously in Mexico, but those were really amazing. And you didn't always sleep, but you were laying down, you closed your eyes and you rested for a little while. And the life that gave us for the rest of the day was wonderful. And I think siestas are underrated.
Oh, I get that. I can get that. Yeah.
So I think giving yourself grace and just knowing, again, here's where everybody's journey is different. Right? You might be struggling with that. I didn't struggle with that so much, but I get the struggle. I understand it. And that might be something that takes longer for you to really work yourself out of.
It doesn't help that Mark has chosen not to retire and he still wants to work, because while he's working, I feel, oh, I should be doing something. He's working. And it is choice, that he's not. He's working because he wants to and he loves it. So there is a bit of a mismatch in my mind about his expectations. They are my expectations. They're not his. We've already had this conversation. He's fine.
We do that to ourselves, don't we?
Yeah. Yeah,
But I think
absolutely.
you mentioned something before though that I think is important. Maybe it was based on a financial decision, but you decided to do things like not having a housekeeper. And I remember watching from your video, stopping the food delivery service that you
Yeah,
had,
yeah.
the meal prep. Um, those are other ways that you contribute to that household, right? It's not just about the money. You're contributing by letting go of those costly things and by actually doing that, then picking up that work of
Mm,
doing that. And so we each have different ways that we contribute to a relationship or to a household, and that's shifting. And so you find other ways, and there are that can show up in really, really tiny details, and it can show up in big ways too. But um, don't undersell yourself there. When you start doing those things, you are contributing in a
mm.
different way than you did before.
That's really interesting actually, because it brings me on to a slightly different subject that I covered in the last video, but actually it's a lot cheaper to not work than I ever thought it would be. Um, I'm spending far less,
Mhm.
A, because I'm not doing as much, I guess,
Right.
but just subscription costs and things
Yes.
that I've got rid of. Um, I don't, there's been a definite shift around, do you know what? I don't want to be buying all of the stuff. I don't want all of the detritus of life around me anymore. I want to
Mhm.
get rid of a lot of things. Simplifying life left, right, and center means that
Yes.
actually I'm not spending anywhere near as much, which is brilliant.
Yes.
Um, so my lovely brother, hiya Brian, has just joined us.
Hi, Brian.
He said, I don't think I'll ever fully retire. My brother's 5 years older than me, but
Mhm.
now I do the work I'm choosing to do. Again, we go back to that choice,
Mhm.
don't we? I'm an entertainer. I love what I do. When I'm sick of it, I'll stop. I
Mhm.
think this is really um, interesting wording as well, Brian, because I've always said I can't imagine I'll ever retire. And it
Yep.
comes back to how do we define
Yes.
retirement? So I don't think I ever will fully retire because my thoughts around retirement are, my the definition that I've had all my life is once you retire, you kind of wait for God. Your feet are up. You're not doing anything. You've lost any sense of purpose. That's it. You're kind of waiting for God.
Mhm.
And I don't think that's how I see what I'm doing now because
Mhm.
I was at an event last week. I was talking on stage at an event last week, and it was lovely. It was my kind of swan song before I fully closed the business. And loads of people came up after me and said, "Oh, what are you going to be doing?" And I said, "I don't know.
Mhm.
I genuinely don't know. At the minute, I don't want to do any work. I don't want to do anything. But I don't know if I'm going to feel like that in 6 months' time or 12 months' time. I don't know what life is going to throw at me. I know so my brother is in the process of emigrating. He's off to live in Cyprus.
Mhm.
We don't know what life is going to bring.
Mhm.
So I'm kind of I don't know where I'm going with this.
Yep.
But yeah,
Th
it's
but
that definition of retirement again, isn't it?
exactly. And I think, Brian brings up a good point. There are a lot of people that they bristle at the word, but again, it's not about the word. Like, I would love for us to think about, this is just a different phase of our life. It's the next chapter. Um, if you're making big changes, it might feel like retirement. You might call it retirement or not. And, however you choose to go about your life is like, who cares what other people are going to call it or say, well, you are retired or not retired. Um, like, kudos to Brian. He's like, I'm just going to keep doing my thing until I decide not to.
Mhm.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Right? It's I think about, like, how my grandfather, he was the first person who really modeled retirement for me, and his was more traditional. Now, he retired at 50, maybe he was younger than 55, but, um, and he laid around by the pool. He took care of me during the summers when I was a little girl. They traveled a little bit and things like that, but he was just done, 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 didn't want to do the other thing anymore. And that's what worked for him. Right. And my path was very different than his, although had some similarities as well. And so it just depends. And I actually, somebody I used to work for, um, who is a very public figure, very public speaker. He's got several YouTube channels, but his name's Peter Diamandis. He said very emphatically several times, I will never retire. Retirement, just like, he doesn't understand the concept and why anybody would want to retire. Now, he has the privilege of his life's work is his life's work. It's not just a paycheck, right? He doesn't, and he's wealthy enough that he doesn't ever have to work anymore. So it is a choice for him. He's just choosing to continue to do what he's doing. And that's fine. It doesn't mean that, oh, if I want to be like Peter, it means I can't ever retire. I think it's a dangerous way to think about it. And there are a number of other people who say the same thing. I can never retire. Okay, then don't, but don't let the traditional concept of the word hang you up. Right. Maybe it's not retirement. Maybe it's just like, but if you're open to future possibilities and to changing your life in other ways, then it's just a different phase of life. It's just a shift. And we get hung up on that word a lot, I think. But here we are on YouTube talking about retirement a lot. And I on my channel, I talk about it all the time. And for me, it's just a word that kind of has enough of a common meaning that people understand what my videos are about, right? That's all. Shoot.
Have you just lost your screen again?
Yep.
Yep.
I got you. Yeah. Sorry. That happened again. So that's all. It's a word that we use with a common understanding that at least gets the conversation started, but it doesn't have to mean the same thing for everybody, and it doesn't have to be what you do for everybody. So
yeah. I mean, my experience is very similar in many ways to you. My parents both died early, and they didn't get to enjoy any kind of retirement. And I think for me, I think we've worked hard all our lives, and there is definitely a feeling of, this is going to sound awful, but I deserve this. I've worked for this. I deserve to retire early. Do I really? Do I deserve to retire early? I don't know. But in my mind, I'm like, actually, no, I've done my bit. And there's going to be many years, hopefully, when I'm not able to do anything. So this bit in the middle where I'm still fitting well enough and healthy enough, I want that to be my time. And there's obviously something in here that is telling me that's lazy, that's entitled, because I struggle with it. In my mind, I'm challenged by the fact that I deserve, because there's enough of my mind going, being lazy.
But this is the only life you have. And if you are able, why would you not choose to do with it exactly what you want to do with it? You don't, like, this is it. We get one time around, right? I mean, other belief systems might argue that, but for all intents and purposes, this is it. And this is why my cancer diagnosis figured so heavily into my choice, because, although it wasn't a, late stage, super life threatening cancer, it was still cancer. And it makes you think about things differently. And that was the gift. I hate to say this, but that was the gift that cancer gave me, was thinking about things differently and approaching life differently. And, Bev, you have this one life to live in whatever way you choose to do it. And like I said, if you are financially able, and there are other things you'd rather be doing, or maybe it's like, for me, part of it was the stress on my body from going through the stressful career took a toll. There's no doubt in my mind that it played a role in me. I don't know if I'm not saying it caused my cancer, but the stress is like the worst thing for your body.
I think so.
Head to toe. And I had 5 years before that, had a pretty serious random health condition as well that landed me in the hospital for like 10 days. And it was awful, but that was also a wake up. I think that was the beginning of my journey of, oh,
It's the weirdest thing, because I think it's very, please don't take this the wrong way, but in my mind, it would be easier for me to justify taking early retirement if I'd had a health scare.
Yeah.
Because I could say, oh, I had this wake up call. And I'm sure I would have done. But part of me is thinking, I don't want to wait until I have a health scare.
No.
I don't want to do that. I want to preempt that and actually, not have that be the catalyst.
Yes.
I'm really interested to know. We've got a few new people on. I can see 9 people watching. We've got 2 fat birds. Hello. And I think All Things Pink is on there. Hello as well.
Oh.
Have you had, is there anything at all that you regret about taking early retirement? Is there anything you miss? So 2 questions. Anything you miss, anything you regret?
No and no.
The fact that nothing came to mind kind of gives you that answer.
Yeah, I don't regret for a single second the choice that I made when I made it. Not at all. I love my life, and just about every single day I wake up and go, "Oh, thank goodness I don't have to get up and get dressed and get out and go da 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 da." With things I miss, that answer would have been different in the first couple years than it is now because I don't miss those things anymore. There are a few people that I miss that I worked with, but I also very much keep in touch with enough people on a regular basis that I still feel that connection. It was really about the people. And of course, social media makes it a little bit easier to have even the illusion of connection with some of those people and what they're doing. I think the thing that I missed the most early on was the feeling of being valuable and contributing, to your point earlier about contributing to the household, but having constant proof points and daily things that I could do to help people and solve problems and feel like, oh, I know the answer to that question, like to feel smart or to feel relevant. That was hard for me to let go of and to understand that wasn't just part of work, that I could replicate that in other areas of my life. It just took a little bit more thought and intentionality to make that happen. And I don't really struggle with that too much anymore. It still rears its ugly head every once in a while, but for the most part, I feel like I've really gotten through that phase.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that gratitude, that thankfulness you talked about just a few minutes ago, I had to go to see the GP. I went to hospital this morning to have x-rays for my knees, and I had to scrape the ice off the car this morning. And I remember I was stood there sort of freezing cold, scraping the car thinking, I am so grateful I don't have to do this every day. But to be fair, I haven't for the last few years anyway. But I think there is that element of maybe what I need to do is switch the feeling of guilt for a feeling of gratitude. I think that will be a big switch for me.
Yeah.
So we've been going an hour. I don't know where that hour's gone.
How did that happen?
I know. I have a question for you though.
Yeah.
If we've got people who I mean, most of the people I think in the chat have retired or are happy with the decision, whatever they've made. So my question to you would be, with everything you've learned through your own journey, bearing in mind that we are all different and it's going to be different for everybody, what would be your best couple of bits of advice for somebody who's maybe at that point where I am or where I was 6 months ago, kind of on the fence, should I, shouldn't I?
Interesting. I'm gonna lean on the thing that we've talked about a few times already too, is that everybody is on their own journey. And that sounds really cliche, but it's true. Everybody's circumstance is different. So no matter, when you hear people say, you have to do this before you retire. Okay, maybe they had to do it. And that's how I try to approach my channel. Here's my experience. But there are no absolutes. And so don't get caught up in thinking that there's a certain way that this happens. Your needs and your circumstances are different from anybody else's, and honor that, and make your decisions based on your analysis of your finances, or your introspection for whether you're ready or not. And don't get caught too much up in what other people say you must do. um, and also, I would say, don't underestimate the psychological emotional journey, because again, I have had a number of people on my channel make comments that they thought, oh, all I have to be is financially ready, and that's it, and then I don't want to work anymore, and so I'm going to just not work. And then they're sort of left with never having imagined what their life is going to look like, or what they want their life to look like. So having an idea of a dream, even of what you want, and it doesn't have to be a big fancy dream. It could be, my perfect day is that I get up without an alarm clock, I have a cup of coffee, I do some reading or some journaling, and I listen to music, and maybe I go out in the garden, or whatever that perfect day is for you. Picture that, and picture being able to do that almost every day. And have a picture in your mind, whether that actually happens or not. At least having that picture to hang on to gives you, I've heard somebody, I can't remember whose channel it was, but they were talking about how we talk about retirement. We talk about retirement in what you're leaving, what you're stopping, and not what you're retiring into. Like, what are you moving into? And I think having that vision, again, whether or not that exact vision ever actually comes true, but at least having a sense of what you might want is really helpful.
Yeah, I think that's true. I watched a YouTube guy, I think it's called Azul,
Yeah.
talking about retirement, and he was saying that I think these are US stats, but so many people in their retirement, if they don't consciously decide what they want their retirement to look like, how their days are going to be filled, end up mindlessly watching TV. A really large proportion of people end up mindlessly watching TV because that's the default if they don't actually, put some sort of conscious plan together.
Yeah.
And I get what you're saying. You don't want to have every moment of your day mapped out. And it's interesting because I still have my Google Calendar and I was filling it with stuff. And Mark said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm putting stuff in my calendar." And he said, "Why?" I said, "Because that's what I do."
Yeah.
And then I looked and I thought, I don't need to do any of that. So I took it out again. But I think, you've got to be a little bit intentional with your time.
Yep.
Otherwise, I don't want to spend 60%, 70% of my day watching TV until I go to sleep.
And that's when the depression hits, right? That's when boredom and depression really kind of come in. And I want to double click a little bit on, I know we're wrapping up, but as a word of advice about the planning process and your calendar and your days. I love a good planner. I still do that all the time. But here's the difference. You put things on your calendar because you want to. And when you put something on your calendar, you're prioritizing it. So sometimes I'll, put go for a walk, or I'll put, something else on my calendar. Doesn't mean you have to do it right at that moment. Now, if you're a creature of habit and you like to build those kinds of things, great. But there's a difference between using a planner to fill out with all of these things that you want to do versus, oh, I have to go to this meeting and that meeting, and then I have to drive over there, and then I have to do this. That's a very different thing. No, you don't have to put things in your calendar, but if you enjoy that, do it. And also, like I said, prioritize the fun things too. Put on your calendar that, one of the things I try to do is to make a certain number of connections with people in my life every week. And that's on my to-do list. That's important to me. So I put that on my to-do list. I don't have to have a to-do list. I'm not working, but it's my life. And so I would rather treat my life as a little bit like as a business, making sure that I'm doing the things that bring me joy and connection and all of that, and make those a priority enough to put them on your calendar.
Yeah, I can definitely see that if I'm not intentional, I could default to wasting a lot of time. And, at the end of the day, I might be retired, but time is still a one and done commodity. I don't get it
Yes.
back, so I don't want to waste it, but I don't wanna feel that I have to account for every moment of every day.
Yes.
Interestingly, with my ADHD brain, I hate structure, but I need structure. I hate routine,
Yes.
but I need routine.
Yeah.
So that's something that I need to be conscious of and manage, not obsessively, but definitely need to
Yep.
manage it.
Absolutely.
Brian's just said, one problem for a lot of retirees is not having a title or a place in someone else's structure.
Mhm.
I get that completely.
Mm.
I mean, I've been in my own structure for the last 7 years with my business, but I
Yep.
had a title of
Yep.
business owner. I had a title of, God, a status. Do I dare say that? In my
No.
business, I was talking on stages. I felt like I was somebody.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying that now I haven't got the business, I feel like I'm a nobody by any means, but it is an identity shift. I
Absolutely.
felt this when I left the military and became plain Mister rather than a rank. And we tie so much of who we are to our identity. And I
Yes.
think James Clear is brilliant in his book Atomic Habits because he always
Mhm.
says, you need to take on the identity of the person whose habits you're trying to build. So
Mm.
I need to now take on the identity of a po
Post-career.
post-career, life after work person. I don't wanna say
Right.
retiree.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
So
No,
I
and
have to form my new identity
yes, and
and own it.
here's a good, sort of way to think about it. Imagine you showed up at a party and you were introducing yourself to somebody and you get the question, "So tell me about yourself," or "What do you do?" What's gonna be your answer? And so think about that, and you may not have the answer right away, but having how you want to say that at the ready can be really helpful because you will get those questions from
What do
people
you
when you
say? What's your
oh
what's
gosh, you know,
Hi,
it has
Tracy, by the way.
changed.
Tracy's just
It
happened to go.
Oh, bye, Tracy.
Giving away.
Um, it has changed over the last few years. A lot of times I do unfortunately say, "Oh, well, I'm retired," because that's what people understand, right? They
Mm.
they get that. Sometimes I'll say, "Well, I'm not working anymore, so I am, I take care of grandchildren. I have a YouTube channel." You kinda list the activities. Um, but it's not an easy question, and I'm not saying I have all the answers either, but if you think about it that way, like, how are you gonna answer that question? It can at least start you down the path of thinking through the issues of how we identify ourselves.
Do you know what? I have this word I made up that I call it FREEtirement. I
Yes.
think I'm just gonna say, "Oh, I'm free
Yeah.
tired." What does that mean? It means I
And
have
there you go, and
freedom
then that starts
to
the
spend my
conversation.
day whatever
Yes.
way I want to.
Yeah. Yep.
Uh, Chris, thank you so much. I've loved this.
Thank you.
I knew I would. I think we could probably talk for another
We could.
5 hours nonstop.
We
Um,
could.
Please do. I think most of you probably are already connected. I know Dan is definitely
Yep.
connected to you,
Yep.
Chris.
Yep.
But if you're not, or if you're watching this on replay and you're really not sure, go who Chris is. Go and check out Chris. I think are you Robinson Chris?
Yeah, the actual URL at the end of the YouTube, thing is Robinson-Chris because there was already a Chris Robinson, so
How dare there
and
be?
it's Chris with a K.
Yeah.
So,
But
yeah,
I'll put the link to your. I
great.
think I've put the link. I think the link is in the description anyway.
Yep, yep,
Um, Absolutely brilliant to chat. Thank you so much to everybody who stuck around and chatted in the comments. If you are
yes.
watching on replay, if you've got questions or just share your thoughts in the comments,
Great.
we're not authorities on being retired because as we've said, there's no absolutes, there's no, we can share our experience and our thoughts, but
Mhm.
we can't we're not giving people advice on how to
Yep,
retire. But I would love to know other people's stories around,
yes.
your experiences. That would be absolutely brilliant.
Yep.
Chris, well, I think we'll leave it there.
Okay.
And
Thank you so much, Bev.
any last things you want to add?
No, I so appreciate you and your approach. And I thank you so much for inviting me to spend this hour with you. I appreciate it.
It's been brilliant. Thanks very much. Take care, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Toodles.